In this video, I'm going to be talking about fatigue and recovery. Fatigue is about being unable to keep up an exercise intensity, leading to a decrease in performance. Training is a way to reduce and resist fatigue. It can delay the time in which fatigue sets in. Different activities are more susceptible to fatigue than others. There are many factors which influence the rate of fatigue. These include the maintenance of ATP resynthesis, hydrogen ion accumulation, glycogen depletion, failure of neurotransmission, and finally dehydration. ATP is constantly being resynthesized by all the different energy systems to provide energy for muscle contractions, as ATP is the only thing that will make muscles contract. If there isn't enough ATP available, then a performance will decrease. Hydrogen ion accumulation is responsible for feeling pain in the muscle after intense exercise. Lactic acid builds up in the muscle, increasing the acidity in the body. Hydrogen ions leave the lactic acid, which is why pain is felt, which therefore leads to muscle fatigue. I'll talk about this more in depth later in the video. Glycogen is one of the main sources of fuel that is responsible for ATP resynthesis. If the glycogen stores become depleted, this can result in muscle fatigue, as once the store is depleted, the body can't use it, so fatigue then occurs. I will again talk a bit more about this later on in the video. Neurotransmission impacts fatigue, as for a muscle contraction to occur, the nerve impulse must cross the synaptic cleft. In muscles that are tired, the transmission of the nerve becomes slower, resulting in muscle fatigue. I'll talk about this a bit more later in the video. Dehydration makes the blood thicker, which therefore increases the heart rate and decreases the amount of blood the heart can pump per beat, causing the blood pressure to drop. Dehydration makes it harder for fat to get to muscles to be used as a fuel for energy for the body. This means that the body is having to work harder to pump blood around the body, meaning that fatigue occurs earlier. Water loss can occur through sweating. In hot conditions or during long duration exercises, sweating is accelerated as more heat is being produced by the body, so it has to get rid of it. It's vital that the individual takes in water to stay hydrated. Exercise can be analysed in many different ways. Some ways include the intensity of the exercise, the duration, the type of the activity, the type of muscle fibre that would be recruited, and the level of fitness that would be required by the individual doing the exercise. Different types of exercises require different components of fitness. For example, a shot put throw would have very different causes of fatigue compared to a marathon. They are two completely different sports. They would both experience some level of fatigue. However, throwing a shot put, there would be a very different amount of fatigue experienced than after a marathon. Furthermore, the recovery time would be very different as well. A shot put throw takes a couple of seconds, whereas a marathon takes hours and hours to complete. Both events require ATP and the need of ATP to be broken down so the muscle contractions can occur, enabling them to complete their event. The marathon would need to use all the different energy systems to resynthesize ATP, but the throw would only rely on ATP as it has such a short duration. There are three different types of physiological fatigue. These are local, general, and chronic. Local fatigue occurs from repeated contractions of the muscle with no recovery time between each rep. It usually occurs when you're doing muscle loading. General fatigue is feeling physically or psychologically inadequate before a training session or a match. And the final type of fatigue is chronic fatigue. This is feeling severe fatigue due to either extreme overtraining or insufficient recovery. An example of fatigue which is psychological is emotional fatigue. Emotional fatigue is to do with when an athlete experiences extreme exhaustion from training and competition. This leads to an athlete completely losing interest in the game and starting to not perform as well as they are capable of. Emotional fatigue can lead to the desire to quit in some athletes, decreasing confidence and feeling anger or irritability towards the sport. An example of when the ATP-PC system would be used is in a 100-metre sprint. The 100-meter sprint is an example of an event that is a maximal intensity and a short duration. An 100-meter sprint is a continuous activity which requires a lot of power and force to be recruited and generated. The ATP-PC system is the best system at generating huge amounts of force and power, and it works anaerobically, meaning without oxygen. In a 100-meter sprint, fast glycolytic muscle fibers would be recruited. This is because these fibers generate the most power and force for short periods of time and wouldn't be able to provide lots of power for longer amounts of time as they fatigue very quickly. They carry out the fastest and strongest contractions which are required in a 100-meter sprint. The 100-meter sprint is an extremely high maximal intensity and short duration. The fitness level of an individual carrying out this event would need to be high due to the maximal output of force. Even though the duration is short, to complete a 100-meter sprint in 10 seconds would require years of training and therefore a high level of fitness. The energy source is PC stores. The fuel which breaks down ATP to PC is phosphocreatine enzymes, such as creatine phosphate. Creatine phosphate is stored inside the muscle cell and resynthesizes ATP rapidly. The ATP to PC system produces no harmful waste products from the use of it, which is a major advantage of using this system. The recovery time after using the ATP to PC system would be a couple of hours. The ATP to PC store is replenished. It's very quick due to the alactic stage of recovery, which replenishes ATP and PC store. However, because the intensity of the exercise was so high, the muscles would need time to recover. The ATP to PC system lasts together around 10 seconds. The ATP stores deplete within around 3 seconds, and the PC stores deplete with around 7 seconds. During the first few seconds, regardless of the intensity of the exercise, the ATP to PC system is relied upon. When the body goes beyond 10 seconds of working, the body uses the other energy systems to replenish ATP. This is because ATP and PC will need time to replenish, because they have run out, so they'll need time to replenish, because they've been totally used up and are completely run out. Casey et al. 1996 said that muscle PC levels can be almost totally depleted after maximal exercise. The ATP to PC store replenishes after around 2 minutes. 50% of PC is replenished in the first 30 seconds. I will talk more about this later on in the video. The ATP to PC system depletes so quickly because there's so little ATP and PC stored in the muscles, meaning that it runs out very, very quickly. Phosphocreatine is synthesized in the liver and is taken to muscles where it is stored. It's mainly useful for high intensity and short duration activities. This is because it's only a very, very small store in the muscles, and so can't power activity for a long time. It's anaerobic because it doesn't require oxygen to work. The depletion of the ATP to PC system affects performance as the intensity of the activity will decrease as the store starts to run out. The depletion of ATP causes fatigue, as if there's a buildup of ADP, this means that ATP is being depleted. If ATP is being consumed at a faster rate than it is made, this results in muscle fatigue, and therefore a lower intensity of exercise needs to be taken on board. The depletion of creatine phosphate results in muscle fatigue, as ATP production can't be maintained, so therefore muscle fatigue occurs. Peak anaerobic power occurs in the first 5 seconds of the activity. The PC store will deplete in the last 7 to 9 seconds of using it. As the PC store is depleting, the intensity of the exercise will be decreasing as well, as the PC store is running out, meaning that the ATP is being resynthesized much slower. So therefore less energy is being made, so less muscle contraction will be occurring. This means that power and force generated will be decreasing, and gradually the performance level will be lowering. The depletion of PC means that the intensity drops as less power and force is being generated. By the time the PC store has completely run out, the lactic acid system is ready to be used and will continue the activity at a lower intensity. While the lactic acid system is in use, the ATP to PC store system store will be replenishing. The recovery won't be long enough to completely replenish the store back to normal though. Depletion of the ATP to PC store can be reduced by taking PC supplements, phosphocreatine supplements. PC supplements are said to help aid athletes by enhancing athletes' physical performance. PC supplements are said to provide athletes with a burst of strength, increase their muscle mass, and help the muscles recover faster during exercise. The supplements are particularly beneficial in short duration and high intensity exercise, such as a 100-meter sprint, as more power, force, and strength can be generated, making the athlete faster. In long durations, there is no evidence that the PC supplements can actually help yet. Creatine supplement is also said to increase the total creatine concentration in the muscles. The supplement also enables ATP to be resynthesized faster, so more energy is being generated for intense exercise. PC is also said to make an athlete more resistant to fatigue, as it delays the onset of fatigue. It is said the best time to consume the supplement is 30 minutes before a training session or immediately after post-workout. At the moment, the supplement is said to have no major side effect, which is a benefit. However, it is said to bring mild cramps and some bloating. The standing vertical jump uses the ATP system, as it is a short duration and a high intensity. The jump would only last a couple of seconds, and so the PC system would not be used unless the jump was carried out continuously. But for just one jump, the ATP system would be solely used. The time of recovery after one jump would be very short, around 20 seconds, as it's very easy to carry out. However, if someone kept on jumping, kept on repeating the jump, and just kept on doing it, the recovery time would increase, as the muscles would be working harder and would be starting to tire. Also, you can't continually do the jump with the same power and height. As fatigue sets in, the ATP store will gradually run out. After 10 continuous standing vertical jumps, the recovery time may be around 1 to 2 minutes. Compared to a 100-meter sprint, the recovery would be longer. This is because in the 100-meter sprint, it's a higher duration and intensity compared to just the standing vertical jump. The recovery time after a 100-meter sprint would be roughly 2 hours. This is because the ATP and PC stores were completely depleted and would need to be restored. In aiding recovery from using the ATP to PC system, the best way is to have intervals. This gives the body a break and time for the alactic stage to kick in, meaning the ATP and PC system can be replenished, so it can be used again. Although it cannot be completely replenished and it cannot work as hard as it could at the beginning, it can still work at a very high intensity. EPOC stands for Exercise Post-Exercise Oxygen Consumption. When we are recovering, we are under EPOC, so it's basically the body recovering. After we fatigue, we have to recover, and that is the period of the EPOC. The oxygen deficit is the amount of oxygen or extra oxygen that is needed to complete the activity if all of the energy could have been supplied aerobically. It is the amount of oxygen the body wanted but couldn't take on board because the body was working anaerobically, because it was working without oxygen. During the first 3 minutes of exercise, the body is working anaerobically, so the oxygen deficit is starting to amount up. Oxygen debt is used to compensate for the oxygen deficit. In maximal exercise, the oxygen deficit would be higher because oxygen isn't being used by the body because the body is working without oxygen. So the oxygen deficit is really large in maximal exercise. The oxygen debt is the temporary shortage of oxygen during exercise. The oxygen debt will occur when the body has worked anaerobically. The oxygen debt occurs during high levels of intense exercise, when the ATP to PC system and the lactic acid system has been used. Oxygen depth can be measured by analysing the oxygen consumption pre and post exercise. During exercise there's not enough oxygen getting to the muscles, they use the anaerobic respiration to get energy. Much less energy is released during this respiration. Anaerobic respiration creates an oxygen debt. During maximal exercise, there is a greater oxygen depth, which is why the epoch is longer than in submax exercise. This is because in submaximal exercise, the body is getting oxygen, so the depth isn't as great. In maximal exercise, because it's anaerobic, it takes more oxygen to recover, as the oxygen the body needed but couldn't get on board, which is oxygen deficit, needs to be replaced. After exercise, heavy breathing still occurs. This is because the body needs to take in extra oxygen to repay the oxygen debt. After the sprint, during recovery, more oxygen is required to recover than the body would have liked to have used if there had been enough available. During maximal exercise, there's a larger oxygen deficit, slower recovery, and larger epoch. The higher the intensity of the exercise, the greater the epoch. When we fatigue, we have to recover. The alactic stage is what occurs in the first 2 to 3 minutes after finishing the event. The aerobic system is used to produce the ATP required to replenish the PC and ATP stores in the body. It takes around 1 to 4 litres of oxygen to complete the recovery process. During the alactic stage, myoglobin and hemoglobin is replenished with half a litre of oxygen, and ATP is replenished, so is the PC store, with the remaining 3 to 4 litres of oxygen. The myoglobin combines with oxygen to take the oxygen to the mitochondria, ready for when exercise begins again. The replenishment of myoglobin and hemoglobin takes roughly around 1 to 2 minutes. The replenishment of the ATP to PC store occurs aerobically. The aerobic system makes energy which resynthesizes ATP in the PC store. 50% of the PC is restored in the first 30 seconds, while the 75% of PC store is restored in 1 minute. The restoration of the ATP to PC store as a whole takes around 3 minutes.